Welcome everybody, and welcome to Michael Lambert. I'm Billy Riggs. I'm the program director for the Master of Public Administration program at University of San Francisco, and we're joined this evening by Michael Lambert. And I want to maybe let Michael introduce himself a little bit, but I want to also introduce a couple of other faculty in our department. And I know we have some prospective students on the line, and we have a lot of alumni and friends, both at the library and at the university, that really wanted to tune in on this. So we're recording this evening, and Michael loves to entertain questions, and our faculty love to entertain questions as well. So we're happy to share our contact info at the end. First, I'll introduce Rich Callahan, a colleague in the department. Very esteemed faculty in leadership management, does some transportation stuff, and has an area of expertise in public health. And he, as well as Vipul, who, and Rich, if you want to just wave, they lead our public health concentration. And I like to say that our public health concentration, it has our program has multiple areas of expertise. So. But we really focus on core of leadership management in the public sector, but public health, housing, transportation, social justice, social equity, those are all places where we thrive. And so, we're very excited to welcome Vipul Vyas to our faculty a couple of years ago. And so Vipul, if you say hi as well, and he leads up our healthcare concentration as well. So esteemed faculty here, and maybe Vipul, since you've known Michael longer than any of us on the call, and I met Michael through Vipul as well, maybe I'll let you introduce Michael and we'll turn it over to him. So.
Yeah, sure. Michael's the city librarian for the city of San Francisco, and we couldn't be happier to have him here. And I'm fortunate to have known him for the vast majority of my life, and seen the meteoric rise in his career. And it's been really amazing to watch. And I think his progression through public service is really something could serve as a template or role model for many. So I think the opportunity to be able to speak to him is amazing, first of all, just in its own right, but also having been a leader who's navigated a large public institution through a worldwide global pandemic is also a story worth listening to. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from Michael in that regard, and understanding how he got to the position he's been in, although I've had a ringside seat to that process, and then also understand how some of the experiences he had to enable him to get where he's gotten, how those informed his decision making during a pretty challenging period that we just went through collectively.
Thank you, Vipul. It's an honor to be here. Everybody, I have so much love for Vipul. He's my lifelong friend, my brother. We grew up 2 houses away from one another. I attended kindergarten with his sister, and I wouldn't be here without Vipul's support and mentorship over the years. So thank you for inviting me.
No problem. And with that,
go, Vipul.
Maybe we can...
why don't you, go ahead. Why don't you give him the first question? Make it hard. and we just want to invite folks on. If you're for those of you attending, if you just pop your questions in the chat, or if there's any dialogue, I'll try to facilitate and aggregate those. We're going to have a lively discussion, and Vipul and I are going to be facilitating. And so just let us know your questions, and we'll keep it rolling. But Vipul, let's dive right in.
Yeah, I think, Michael, the first question I have is, how do you use Zoom? I think that's the pressing one for the day.
We use Microsoft Teams, so.
Okay. But actually, in that regard, sort of as a pivot off of some of our Keystone Cop moments at the beginning of the call, is how did you guys embrace technology, being an institution at the heart of Silicon Valley, in making some of the transition that you had to make operationally? First, I guess, what things do you have to change? What happened last year as you guys entered the pandemic as the public library system for the city of San Francisco, what operationally had to change? And then maybe sort of as an underlay to that, what technology did you have to lean into to enable those operational changes?
Thank you for the question. As a little background, the San Francisco Public Library is one of the premier urban libraries in the country. It's a very robust, well-supported system, 28 public-facing facilities. I'm in the main library here, our flagship location and Civic Center. And San Francisco Public Library is considered, an innovator in our field, and naturally, we've had to adapt and adopt the effective use of technology. So we had a robust infrastructure already. I have my own CIO and IT shop that supports, desktop support and our web presence, innovation, R&D, networks, everything you can imagine. And we already had a pretty robust network. We're on the city's fiber network, and we have, very high-speed connections. We are the largest free provider of high-speed internet in the community. Being in, the tech center of Silicon Valley, there still exists a digital divide. And, San Francisco, in many ways, is a tale of two cities. There's 100,000 people in this city that don't have broadband to the home. So we fulfill that need for public access to technology. So in many ways, we were well equipped to pivot. And, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was shut down a robust library system. 28 locations that were all open 7 days a week. It came to a halt on Friday, March 13th. And it's been a slog to get reopened. But in those weeks and months, in the earliest days of the pandemic, we did transition to a lot of remote work for our staff. We started developing virtual programming. Our mayor, Madam London Breed, was one of the first individuals to do a virtual story time online. And, we've really gotten our sea legs. We've hosted, thousands of programs over this past year. We had our One City, One Book event with New York Times bestselling author Chanel Miller, author of Know My Name. And we've had our inaugural address with the appointment of our new San Francisco Poet Laureate, Tongo Eisen Martin. We've hosted our Night of Ideas with the French Consulate and SF MoMA, had over 5,000 people tune in for that event. So I think one of the things that has been hard has been, we didn't have access to our physical collections for many, many weeks and months. And as a result, we've seen an exponential increase in utilization of our digital resources. We have a very robust catalog of ebooks and streaming services. So the usage of all of those platforms went up 62% year over year. And, we've gradually been phasing our reopening. And so it does present a unique opportunity for us as we get fully reopened by August. What are we going to hang on to? We are reaching more people in this virtual environment. We can pack 235 people, give or take, in our Correct Auditorium at the main library for a major event. But now we can attract a worldwide audience, and we do for some of the programming that we're delivering. So it's been extremely challenging, and that's just really scratching the surface of, the library programs and services that we've been doing this past year.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that, Michael, too, because it really changes the mission of the library to being, serving a city and really even beyond city of San Francisco, which I'm sure is a potential point of tension too with some of the civic taxpayers. But I think we jumped right into the meat, and so maybe I could rewind a little bit because I think I've watched you read books to my kids. And so I think what's interesting is that you mentioned a lot of these programs that you have still kept the heart of yourself as a librarian, which is really kind of cool. But maybe you could just walk us through, since you've become a public administrator, a manager. What did a normal week look like then, before COVID, and what does it look like now? So you were saying before we got on that you were in you meet with your department heads and you're in with the mayor. And so, what does your job look like at your level, at the leadership level?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I would just say I have so much respect for the University of San Francisco and what you contribute to the city and county of San Francisco. I work with many of your alumni. Many of your alumni work for my institution. I should point out my San Francisco Public Library is led by Dr. Mary Wardell Giraduzzi, who recently transitioned from the University of San Francisco as your Chief Diversity Officer. She just recently took a tenured position with the University of Pacific. So just wanted to say lots of gratitude and respect for the work you're doing. And as I mentioned earlier, before we started recording, one of your Master's in Public Administration alums, Chris Brown, is now leading the Chicago Public Library, and he's a dear friend of mine. But what does a city librarian do? What does it mean? Well, I'm a department head for the city and county of San Francisco. I was appointed by Mayor Breed a couple years ago, and I've been with the San Francisco Public Library for about 7.5 years total. I was the deputy city librarian for many years and had the opportunity to learn from my predecessor. As the department head, I have approximately 900 employees, 28 public-facing facilities. San Francisco has the second most libraries per capita, or per square mile, of any municipality in the country. As a testament to how well supported we are, we have the largest book budget per capita. We have 4 bookmobiles. Pre-COVID, all of our libraries were open 7 days a week. So it's a very robust system. As a department head, I am a public servant. I'm an ambassador for the city and county of San Francisco. I am a public steward of the community's resources. I take that very seriously. And, really my role, aside from being a mission-driven librarian, is to be an administrator and to optimize the assets that I have for the greatest and highest level of service I can provide in the most efficient and economical manner. And I have a $171 million budget for the upcoming fiscal year, FY22. And that allows me to provide an extremely high level of service to the residents of San Francisco. San Francisco residents are very progressive, very generous. They agreed to tax themselves just for public library services back in 1994. That was renewed in 2007, and I hope to go back to the voters next year to seek another 15-year renewal. So what do I do? I have lots of meetings with my direct reports, my executive leadership team. I meet with the Library Commission. It's a 7-member body. They're all appointed by the mayor. They are my governance body. I'll be going before the Board of Supervisors next week to present our budget. So advocating for the library is a very important role for me. I have to promote and advance our mission. Draft reports, give presentations, lots of email. And I really like to get out in the field. I like to engage with the community, engage with my staff, engage with stakeholders. At the end of the day, I'm a public servant, and customer service is very important to me. We have core values for service excellence, and we take great pride in delivering the highest possible level of service that we can to our community, but also delivering a high level of internal customer service across our internal divisions. So that's kind of a high level overview. I've been working in libraries for 29 years, and I'm just very passionate about the role of the public library. We're the most democratic of institutions. We are really one of the societal safety nets in a time when many services and societal supports have been stripped away.
Maybe, I'll invite Vipul or Rich to weigh in a little bit too and ask any questions they might have. But, I'm curious, that last little thing you said was something I've been interested in, and particularly in a city where we have, some acute housing issues and we have some of these other things, how has the library, positioned itself as more than a library, and what are the unique things you've done along those lines?
Thank you for the question. Well, as you all know, libraries have been evolving. We're not the gatekeeper of information anymore. People can hop on their phone or Amazon, their devices, and get instant access to information. And we're not just a repository of books. So our vision for the San Francisco Public Library is really this concept of connected community and fostering shared experiences for a more connected community. I mentioned earlier that we pride ourselves on being the most democratic of institutions. So that means 28 buildings in San Francisco that anybody and everybody from cradle to grave, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of their housing status, their ethnicity, their gender identity, everybody is welcome to come in these facilities and be served, at a high level. And, San Francisco Public Library has a long history of innovation. We have collections in over 50 languages. We pride ourselves on serving our diverse community. We have, a Talking Books and Braille Center. We have a Deaf Services Center. We have accessible adaptive technology. We were the first public library in the country to have a full-time psychiatric social worker embedded in our main library, and we've continued to build out that program. We hire people who are formerly experiencing homelessness to work for us as health and safety associates. They can engage with the community and work with our social worker to get people referred to services. Pre-COVID, we were hosting a pop-up care village once a month where we would bring in partners like Lavame and provide access to showers and free haircuts and hot food and live entertainment at least once a month, just to restore people's humanity and dignity. Right now I have a partnership with a group called Urban Alchemy, and their mission is to provide workforce development opportunities for people reentry, coming out of prison. So we have Urban Alchemy posted up here. They're helping as restroom monitors, as ambassadors to welcome people back into the library as we reopen. So, my mission is really to optimize our budget for the greatest and highest good. We're working with the San Francisco Arts Commission to provide, support for artists and artists in residence opportunities here at the library. So another thing I'm really excited about, we're going to give away 500,000 books this summer. Every San Francisco Unified School District child, 50,000 kids, each one of them is going to get 10 brand new books this summer that they get to keep. And this is going to seed, personal libraries, really after a year of COVID, kind of restore some love of reading and learning and prepare them to go back to school in the fall, ready to read, ready to learn and thrive again. I mentioned earlier, we are the largest free provider of high-speed internet. So we do a lot of digital literacy training, workforce development training. We support small business really the menu of programs and services is amazing. We have an accredited high school diploma that people can get online through the San Francisco Public Library. So we're constantly looking for opportunities to partner with our city and county departments, our nonprofits, community-based organizations for more collective impact.
That's fascinating. I want to figure out this free book program, because I'm all about getting my kids off their computers. So Vipul, I'm sure you are too. So maybe Rich, Vipul, you sounds like you want to chime in.
No, I'll let Rich go. I've got a few questions, but I don't want to hog the time. So Rich, if you've got one, go ahead and shoot.
Sure. Michael, you talked about that the role of libraries has changed from gatekeeper of information to really helping people facilitate and access information. To me, there's an emerging question too of helping people evaluate the credibility of information, whether it's for their own personal use in time of pandemic and advice on health, whether it's more general public administration, public policy. How do you see that as an emerging question, and how do you see the library's role in helping people understand that there's more credible information and less credible information? There's well-designed research that provides viable findings, and there's less well-designed research. Or is that really beyond the scope of what we can expect from libraries?
No, I think that is precisely in our wheelhouse, and I see it as an equity issue. So information literacy is critically important, and that is a role for a librarian to help people find information, evaluate the information, interpret information. And, with this concept of fake news and all the polarization going on, there is a role for the library to help people become more media literate. But I'll give you another example of how we help people become more informed. We have a smart money coaching program. So we provide access to certified financial coaches that can work one-on-one with people to help them develop, financial plans, get out of debt, learn the basics of budgeting. So that's a very discrete example of how people can be empowered with information. And, we're very focused on outcomes now, and not just counting how many books we circulate or how many people attend a program or come through our doors. We're following up with people and trying to assess, what has changed in their life as a result of participating in a library program, whether it's, a workforce development program or a technology program. We have lots of different programs and services, and we're really trying to get away from this transactional model of service, check in, check out, and really focus on transformative experiences where we can really impact people's lives.
That's fascinating.
Great, thank you.
Vipul.
Yeah, I think, Michael, what you've been alluding to is the library seems to have a big role in dealing in what I would refer to as commonly referred to as social determinants of health. In that regard, and you talked about financial literacy was amazing. Do you guys have any integration in terms of health and well-being? And it sounds like, based on some of the programs alluded to, you do. But is that something you guys formally look at in terms of outcomes of the health of the population?
Well, this year was a great example of that. So we closed our doors on Friday, March 13th, and immediately the city called upon us to launch emergency child and youth care for healthcare workers. The school system closed down, and, we needed our healthcare workers to go to work and be able to provide healthcare and save people's lives. So it was a little bit of a bumpy transition for the library because we're librarians and not necessarily childcare workers and youth development professionals, although we do have some of that expertise. So our emergency child and youth care, it launched for like one day. And one thing some of you on this call will encounter in your life if you become a public sector or even a private sector administrator is dealing with labor unions. So the emergency child and youth care, paused at the library. The Recreation and Parks Department, who has more expertise with summer camps and after school programs, they were able to take that and fully launch. But what our staff were able to do was to serve the broader public health needs. And so under state law, municipal workers can be activated as disaster service workers. And I mentioned earlier, I have about 900 staff. Well, over the course of this past year, 2/3 of my workforce, 590 of my staff were mobilized as disaster service workers. So one of the most critical functions that they have done are librarians. I had over 100 librarians serving as contact tracers and contact investigators. So, the public health system, they're responsible for contacting people and finding out who they've been around and then contacting those people and letting them know they may have been exposed. And, in the earliest days, that was so critical to save lives and tell people you need to quarantine, you need to shelter in place. Also, from a public health response, we went into hotels, sheltering people experiencing homelessness, myself included. I led 60 of my staff that worked in hotels all across the city, sheltering people experiencing homelessness, families, children, also quarantine hotels where people had to post up when they were sick. That was very challenging work and very difficult for many of my staff to make that transition from checking out books to taking care of people in hotels. I mean, we served people hot meals. We made sure they had supplies in their rooms that they needed. But it was also some of the most rewarding and gratifying work I've ever done in my career. We've also staffed the food banks in the city that were so critically important in the earliest days of the pandemic. I can go on and on. Our staff staffed COVID vaccination sites, COVID testing sites. The library, more than any other department, was the backbone. I mean, we provided over 50% of the disaster service workers at some of the peak times during the pandemic. And I'm just really proud of the workforce. And I still have over 60 of my staff that are doing disaster service work through the end of this calendar year. And they're still doing contact tracing investigations. They're helping to staff information and guidance and a lot of critical functions for the Department of Emergency Management. The other thing I'll point out from a health and safety standpoint, we used 10 of our 28 libraries as community learning hubs. The schools closed, and we have so many youth and families, the most vulnerable populations, they don't have a Chromebook or a MacBook or broadband at the home. So we activated library locations to provide a safe space with connectivity. And we brought in community-based organizations that had the youth development professionals to provide those social and emotional support. So, this started as emergency child and youth care, and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, they really led this effort, and they brought in the library, the Recreation and Parks Department. But we had over 80 sites this past year that was, for all practical purposes, a shadow school district as the San Francisco Unified School District gradually came back online by the end of the year. So those are some examples of how the library has really stepped up and fulfilled a critical public health response. And I look forward to continuing to partner with Dr. Grant Colfax and my other colleagues in the city to see how we can continue this organizational development and strengthen our partnerships.
My kind of reaction to that is simply wow. And I guess an extension of that is, what are the things you think will endure beyond 2020, 2021 that maybe were accelerated, or things you just found yourself doing that you didn't ever anticipate doing, but now may just kind of stick?
Well, I think for the San Francisco Public Library, what this has really cemented for me is that getting out of our silos and really just deepening our partnerships with other city and county family, that's the future of the San Francisco Public Library, is really leveraging our resources, partnering. You know, I worked with the Human Rights Commission, I worked with the Human Services Agency, I worked with the school district. We worked very hard over this past year during the pandemic to get books in the hands of the most vulnerable youth and families. And we gave away free toys, and we just wanted youth to have what they needed to be happy and healthy and continue to thrive in a very bleak time. And so I think when I look at the public library, we have staff, we have collections, we have facilities, we have technology, and we have budgetary resources. So those are all assets, and it's not necessarily about public library service per se, but it's about public service and leveraging those assets for the greatest and highest good. We can't solve homelessness or the housing crisis, but what this has really demonstrated is libraries are social infrastructure, and we are directly responsive to the health, the resiliency, and the economic recovery of our city. And so I think this has certainly raised the profile of the public library over the past year.
Well, I'd say, you paint a picture of partnership that's, I think, the future of government in general. This idea of moving away from silos, and it's definitely kind of, I think, what our faculty believe and teach, and it's great to see you practicing that on the ground. I can imagine, from a public health standpoint, just, what our children have grappled with psychologically. It sounds like you've done a lot to buffer those psychological impacts of the pandemic. So maybe I'll keep along that line and maybe start to kind of pivot a little more personally, Michael, is that, I think part of you performing on your job is how your job sounds like it's been really intense the last year. How have you maintained your own, mental, spiritual, physical well-being, and how have you practiced self-care so that you can function like that?
Wow, it's a great question. I think what has served me well is I had pretty strong reserves that I had built up prior to this year. I think if you're going to be in a leadership role, you really have to take good care of yourself. And I was living at the YMCA at least once a day, if not twice a day. Just being a department head and administrator, it's a stressful life anyway, and it's pretty demanding. But I love what I do, and I love working for the city and county of San Francisco. I love the people I work with. I love the patrons and the mission of the library. So I think for me, just having strong support networks, Vipul, my best friend, he's always been there for me, and I lean on him and other people in my life. I think it's just really important to take care of yourself, eat right, exercise. I haven't been able to exercise as much this past year with the gyms being closed, but I take a walk every day, like a 5-mile walk. It's a loop from my apartment to my son's high school and back, and just clear my head at the end of the day, and take the stairs up and down this 6-story building all day. But I'm looking forward to getting back in the gym. But yeah, I think it's pretty basic. Just, you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, that mind-body connection. That's a good reminder for, people that are progressing into roles of leadership. And so, I wanted to talk to you, but we have students that are at that precipice, that are moving into leadership roles, or will have the opportunity in the future. And I asked, was kind of talking to you beforehand, just about like, so, did this just happen? How did you set yourself up, 7.5 years ago to stumble into this leadership role you're now in? And are there things that young professionals, aspiring professionals, can do to prepare for those roles in advance, or to anticipate them early on, even as they're entering their graduate degree?
For that question, and I'll just share a little bit about my career journey. So this is my 29th year working in public libraries. I'm old. I'm a lot older than I look, and I started out.
And Michael, we should recognize you as, you said, we didn't even acknowledge you as the first Asian American head of a public library in the U.S.
Oh,
right?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm proud to be the first Asian American to lead the San Francisco Public Library in its 142-year run as an institution. So very proud to represent the community and do what I can to stand together with everyone in our community and uplift community. But, I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be a librarian. In hindsight, maybe it made sense. I had a very organized comic book collection that I used to trade with Vipple back in the day. But it was just random. When I was in college at the University of South Carolina back in the early 90s, when I wanted to look for a job, I didn't go on the internet. I went to the Job Career Center on campus, and they had binders with clippings, and they had bulletin boards with jobs posted. And I just saw this opportunity at the public library. It was in the periodicals department. And what appealed to me, it was the schedule. It was nights and weekends. I was like, this is perfect. I can go to class and then, make some extra money. And so it was a magical experience. I started out in November of 1992, and in February of 1993, we moved into a new building. They just opened the new main library in Columbia, South Carolina. And that was part of a whole revitalization of Columbia that started with the library reopening. And I worked there throughout college, gradually advancing, and just really developed a passion for the work. I was able to work in the children's room and do story times and puppet shows, and really see the impact of library services and getting kids excited about reading and learning. And so after working there, I had a full-time job waiting for me when I graduated as an undergrad. And after about 6 years working at the public library, I said, I should go to grad school and get my master's degree in library and information science and make a career out of this. And so graduated in May of 2000. Vipul and I actually landed in Silicon Valley about 6 months apart, just randomly. It was total serendipity. And it was delightful to have my best friend down in Mountain View. I was living in Foster City, but I worked for the San Mateo County Library for 6 years and managed some branches. I knew I wanted to be a library director, and I should have gone to the University of San Francisco and gotten a master's degree in public administration. But I went through this other certification program. There's a certified public library administrator program through the American Library Association. And it wasn't as robust as getting an MPA, but it helped. And I worked in San Mateo County for 6 years, got married, started a family, felt the tug, this conventional wisdom, I should move back to the Carolinas, it's cheaper there. So I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for several years, but I missed the Bay Area. And I had an opportunity to come back to San Mateo County in 2012 as the deputy director there. And I was in San Mateo County for a couple years, and I was headhunted to come up to San Francisco. And it's been my dream job. It doesn't get any better than San Francisco. We are the most well-supported library system in the country. People love their libraries here. It's a highly literate community. They really appreciate the cultural aspect of public libraries and also what we represent, as an institution. And then just getting the nod from Mayor Breed, it's just been the biggest privilege and honor I could ever dream of in my life. And I pinch myself and I count my blessings every day. My lesson to all of you students is to, just work hard and stick with it. I mean, I don't know who said it, but it's like showing up is like 90% of success. And, I just grind, I'm always on, I love my job, so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to advance the mission and support my team and support the community. I guess my mantra is to do right, do your best, and the platinum rule, treat others as they would have you treat them. So it's pretty basic stuff.
Words to live by. That's awesome, Michael. And by the way, you still can get a public administration degree. We can figure that out. The application deadline is coming up. So, well, I want to thank you from me, and I've known you for probably, I think, about 5 years as well, and through our mutual friend Vipul. But given kind of your, lifelong relationship, I want to give Vipul the final word. We've had you on here for about an hour, and you have yet to finish your workday and head to your apartment.
No, I can stay as long as you guys need me.
So, but Vipul, maybe if you had any final question that you were just curious about, or you wanted to, tell us, all the the fatal flaws of Michael. But may want you take us home.
No, I think what I've learned today is that the library does more than we've anticipated, its role being in the past historically. And so, Michael, I think the question was, what do you see as the future of libraries? Maybe just kind of your summary thoughts in that regard.
Well, I don't have the answer necessarily. So I'll tell you what I am doing. We're in the process of hiring a consultant to lead us through a very robust process. And we're going to do community engagement in all 11 of these supervisorial districts in San Francisco. We're also going to do robust community engagement. Excuse me. The demand for physical collections, it peaked in 2012. There's been a steady decline, 3 to 5% a year in the demand for physical books. I think, the physical book is always going to be with us. It's certainly my preference, but we can't ignore the trend data, and, convenience matters. So I think, our space, people value it for co-working space, as a community hub, a meeting space for neighborhoods and community groups. It's also a space for programming. We offer over 10,000 programs a year, events, classes, experiences, performances. And pre-COVID, we had over 500,000 people attend our programs in the last full fiscal year. And that's, in-person attendance. So I think there's something we can build on. I mean, we foster community and bring people together in a way that other institutions don't or aren't equipped to do in the same way as the public library. This role in bridging the digital divide is still critical. So I think there's a lot of different service responses. I mean, it's getting hotter in San Francisco with climate change. So the library serves a role as an air respite center when we have wildfire events. Not everybody has good ventilation in their home. A cooling center. Not everybody has air conditioning. So as I mentioned earlier, we're social infrastructure. And I think, the mission is always going to be about free and open access to information, services, resources, but what that makeup is subject to change.
Makes sense. Yep. No, it's been great having you on, and I've learned so much about the role the library plays beyond what I may have had preconceived notions of. Sorry, Billy, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Rich, I know you were expressing your gratefulness as well.
I appreciate it. It's inspiring to hear public service at its best, Michael, and you and your staff truly embody that. Your efforts that you described during COVID, and it's what we as faculty aspire to bring out in what our students are doing currently and what they'll do into the future. One of our recent graduates was the chief deputy at San Francisco City County Emergency Response Department, and another was chief of policy for homelessness. And both of them, as with yourself, were highly engaged. And it's really an inspiration to me as faculty and to our current students and prospective students. So deeply grateful for the introduction. And you're continuing a long line of really outstanding public service through the library. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. And I think you all know this. Madam London Breed is an alum. Didn't she get her master's in public administration from your school?
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. So a very distinguished alum as chief executive for the city and county of San Francisco, and absolutely. So
well, our city has fared better than any city in the world. I mean, as far as when you consider everything, our density, our mortality rate, currently our vaccination rate. I mean, if we were a country, we'd have the second highest vaccination rate in the world. So I'm very fortunate to work for a strong mayor.
Well, we are proud of her, and we're very proud of you, Michael. So thank you for your time, and thanks for the students that stuck around, and for everybody that's tuning in after the fact. We're really
and Billy, you'll send us all the.
Can
you send me the link so I can share it with other people and Hannah as well?
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you, Hannah, for helping us with this. All right. Cheers,
Enjoyed
everybody.
it. Thank you.